Shalom, welcome back. We're going to be talking about the book of Obadiah today. It's a really short book. It's only one chapter. In most Bibles, it takes up exactly one page, so it's not very long. There's nothing much known about the prophet Obadiah as a person, or even about the time that he wrote. It may have been written before the exile to Babylon, though many scholars believe that it was composed either sometime after 586 BC or maybe in the mid-5th century BC, after the tribes of Judah and Benjamin had returned to the area around Jerusalem. So you don't know a whole lot about him. The book of Obadiah is primarily about the judgment that comes upon Edom in the latter days. And it doesn't pertain directly to the greater Exodus, but the greater Exodus occurs at the same time as Esau's judgment. And so in that respect, it does pertain to it. So because this is a short book, it's going to be a short presentation today. Maybe this is a good time to pause for a minute and say, okay, what have we seen so far in these books from the various prophets that we've looked at? Like, so far we've done Isaiah, we've done Jeremiah, Ezekiel. We didn't do Daniel or Joel because I don't think there's anything in those books that ties directly to the greater Exodus. We also looked at Hosea and Amos. So the pattern that I'm seeing is that there is a time of trouble for Jacob. In fact, the prophet Jeremiah calls it Jacob's trouble. And the trouble is being caused by Esau. Esau is attempting to wipe out Jacob. And it is during this time that God has to intervene personally to save Jacob, because Esau is at a position of power over Jacob to the point that it looks like he's going to be successful in wiping out Jacob. There are several references in Ezekiel and Jeremiah that indicate that Jacob is going to be few in number after this. There's also a number of references that a tenth will be left of Jacob. So there's going to be a lot of destruction and a lot of pain and suffering that occurs during this time. And the reason for the suffering, the reason that Esau is allowed to get to this position of power is he's following after the same pattern that we see in the book of Genesis, where Balak suggests that Balaam overcome Israel by tempting Israel to sin. And so these Moabites, they are tempting Israel into idolatry. They're tempting Israel into sexual fornication. And it is because of this behavior, this sinful behavior that's being embraced by Jacob in the book of Genesis, that the Moabites are able to get in a position to have power and authority and fight against Israel. And it's not until Phinehas runs a spear through these two Israelites that are engaged in intercourse that the judgment is stayed. And it takes the Israelites that are still true to Yahweh, basically waging a civil war against the sinful nation, or their sinful brothers, let's say. So a similar situation is unfolding in the latter days between or in the tribes of Jacob, where you have sexual immorality, and it's being perpetrated primarily by Esau himself. So Esau is getting Jacob to sin, which causes God's protection to fall away from Jacob, Israel. And we're not told specifics about what happens, but there's a war. Cities are destroyed, cities are laid waste. And it is during this time of God's judgment that Esau physically attacks Jacob. And it is at this point that Yahweh has enough from what I can see, and he personally intervenes and defeats Esau. And I believe it's Jeremiah who says something to the effect that that Yahweh has to save Jacob from someone more powerful than himself, more powerful than Jacob. So the idea is that Jacob is in danger of being wiped out completely. It's at this time that the tribes are gathered together. They're gathered around this Davidic king, David the prince, David the branch, who leads them in this greater exodus into the land of Palestine. There are from the other nations, Israelites are being brought to the main body of Israelites. It says that kings and princes will be escorting them there. So apparently the regathering itself goes on for some time, and there's actually other nations involved in transporting the children of Israel to this main group, from what I can gather. And then Israel, the tribes of Israel are brought back into Palestine, which was being occupied by Esau. But Esau has been removed from Palestine, and I believe that Yahweh himself personally does that. It could be that the Israelites themselves wage war against Esau while he's still in Palestine. It's a little unclear there. But Israel is back in the land, and so Yahweh has his covenant of peace with Israel, and Israel's dwelling securely. And then the remnant of Esau, who is inhabiting a second country, in the book of Ezekiel, it says that Esau has claimed 2 nations for himself. And one of those nations is identified. It is the land of Israel, the Palestine. But there's another nation. Now, I personally believe that that's what's going on right now in Ukraine, is Esau's attempting to take a second nation. And it is the remnant of Esau that is left in that nation that comes against Israel. And so he comes against the Israelites that have been returned to the land, that are dwelling safely. And that is once again when Yahweh himself stands up and says, okay, I've had enough. And that is when he really exhibits his power and authority to stop this thing going on with Esau. So, and from that point forward, there's peace. So that's what I'm seeing so far. The fact that it is in my mind, that second nation may be Ukraine, is because it is definitely Edomites that are attempting to set up a nation there. I've followed this whole situation for a long time, probably longer than most of you have. My family used to own a business that worked directly with government officials in Ukraine. My family had a international adoption agency, and we helped to adopt children from Ukraine to American families. I've been to Ukraine several times. I know people who used to be high up in government there. We would travel to Ukraine and have meetings with senators and high-ranking officials. So I've had a special interest in Ukraine, so in the United States, through John McCain and Lindsey Graham, we're starting a civil war over there like 9 years ago. I remember that. I remember watching the riots, and it was an attempted communist overthrow, and I think they ended up being successful. It was essentially communists posing as Nazis, which was kind of weird. But what it is, it's an Edomite takeover, and Edom today is what we would know as modern day Jewish people. That is Edom. That is according to the Jewish Encyclopedia. That is according to the history given to us by Josephus, by things that are said in the New Testament to identify who the Sadducees and the Pharisees were. And I'm kind of surprised more people don't know who Esau is. The information's out there. That's the purpose and the story behind the story of the wheat and the tares, Yeshua's parable. It's about Jacob and Esau. So the evidence is there. I don't know that it's really very disputable. To be honest with you, like I know people can dispute it out of ignorance or out of their own religious type of beliefs, where they believe a certain group of people out there is God's chosen people, but they're clearly not. Peter himself in 2 Peter identifies who God's chosen people is, and it's not these Edomites, it is the Christians are God's chosen people. He says it very plainly. So after the previous videos we've done in this series, that's where I'm at in my thinking. That's kind of the scenario that I see unfolding. That's the situation that leads to the greater Exodus from what I can tell thus far. So unless we see some more information in the rest of the minor prophets, that's where I am with this whole understanding of this event. So, without further ado, we'll step into the book of Obadiah, and we'll see what he has to say. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Master Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a report from Yahweh, and an envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, Arise, and let us go against her for battle. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the cleft of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place, who say in your heart, Who will bring me down to earth? Though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares Yahweh. Okay, so the opening line, of course, this is concerning Edom. And it says, We have heard a report from Yahweh, and an envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, Arise and let us go against her for battle. I'm not sure if this is Esau sending out this envoy saying, Let's go against her for battle, speaking about going against Israel for battle, or if this is Yahweh sending the envoy saying, Let's go against her, let's go against Edom for battle. I don't know that it really changes the message here. The point is that Edom is defeated, and he's defeated because that's Yahweh's decree. He says, Behold, I will make you, Edom, small among the nations. You are greatly despised. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the cleft of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place, who say in your heart, Who will bring me down to earth? So, again, this is knowing the identity of Edom today. This is something I see a lot reflected in their own writings, their shenanigans that they're involved in. There's a certain amount of arrogance, a certain amount of this almost like they think they're untouchable. They certainly are. People either don't notice them, or once they do notice them, Edom becomes very despised because he's constantly working behind the scenes. It says, "You who live in the cleft of the rock." Usually, if you're in the cleft of the rock, you're hiding yourself. So, one example would be like George Soros, who's in a lot of different shady operations, undermining certain nations of the world, raising revolutions, funding subversive causes, but he's doing it in secret. He's hiding behind corporations and hiding behind different funds and hiding in the cleft of the rock, in the loftiness of his dwelling place. And he's just one example. I could name at least a dozen others of this tribe of people that are constantly involved in things behind the scenes. who say in your heart, "Who will bring me down to earth? Though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares Yahweh." In the prophetic language that we talked about in our series in the book of Revelation, there was a list of terms that Sir Isaac Newton had come up with. Stars was one of those. So stars represent the tribes of Israel. We see that in Joseph's vision. So the stars, he sets his nest among Israel, and Esau. That's where Esau is. He's always nested in these Israelite nations, but he's hiding himself, and he's working behind the scenes. And so he'll work his way up into high positions of power within the Israelite nations, and then he uses that power to subvert the nation that he's given that position in. And from there I will bring you down, declares Yahweh. So to me, this is very appropriate and very accurate for the position of Edom today. And if you have not watched my series on who is Esau Edom, you should, because that shows you the evidence, that shows you the proof of what Esau's doing. Obadiah 1:5, "If thieves came to you, if robbers by night, oh, how you would be ruined. Would they not steal only until they had enough? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not leave some gleanings? Oh, how Esau will be ransacked, and his hidden treasures searched out. All the men allied with you will send you forth to the border, and the men at peace with you will deceive you and overpower you. They who eat your bread will set an ambush for you. There is no understanding in you. Will I not, on that day, declares Yahweh, destroy wise men from Edom, and understanding from the mountain of Esau? Then your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman, so that everyone may be cut off from the mountains of Esau by slaughter." Once again, turning to the prophetic language from Newton, a mountain is like a political body or a government. So like when Yeshua says that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, that even this mountain could be thrown into the sea. Well, Israel at the time, or Judah at the time, was being oppressed by Edom. Edom had taken control of Judea, and they were the true oppressors. Like you listen to a sermon, you listen to a pastor speak about the condition in Judea, they always talk about the Roman occupation. But the Roman occupation wasn't the really bad part of it. The thing that made it especially grievous to the Israelites was the fact that in between Rome and Judah was Esau ruling over Judah, and they were the ones ruling with the iron fist. Rome had appointed the Herods, who were Edomites, to rule over Judea, and the Judeans themselves were really just being more or less crushed under the heel of Esau at that point. And So that mountain being cast into the sea, I believe, is Yeshua speaking about the Edomites that were ruling over them, not necessarily the Romans, because Yeshua, you didn't see him arguing with the Romans. You saw him arguing with the Edomites constantly, scribes and Pharisees, the Sadducees and Pharisees. It was always Edom that he was arguing with. He didn't seem to have that big of an issue with Rome. It was the Edomite living in Judea that he had the conflict with. So Esau will be plundered. The men allied with him will turn against him. Esau wouldn't have any real power in the world today if it wasn't for the people who I believe are of the tribes of Israel, who will take bribes from Esau and allow Esau to do what he does. We wonder why in the political realm it seems like no matter who you elect to office, the same agendas are always being pushed through, and it's the agendas that the people are against. Here in America, the agenda being pushed by the government is not what the majority of the Americans are for. In Canada, the policies pushed by the Canadian government are not the policies supported by the Canadian people. In Great Britain, in Germany, in France, these policies and programs that are implemented by these governments are done so against the will of the people. And of course, we're taught that we're in a democracy, and the business is decided by the will of the people, but that's not what's actually happening. So there are people allied with Esau behind the scenes, and it's Esau's agenda that's being pushed through. But at some point, those people are going to turn on them. Those who eat your bread will set an ambush for you. Will I not on that day, declares Yahweh, destroy wise men from Edom and understanding from the mountain of Esau? And again, the mountain, of course, is this political entity, this conspiracy of Esau, I would say. And that's where the arrogance comes from. It's this total lack of being able to read the room when people are turning against you. Instead of walking away from your agenda or like taking it back a notch, it seems like Esau is trying to push it forward, push that much harder, and that's arrogance. That's a lack of understanding, and I think that's going to be Esau's downfall. Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you will be cut off forever. On the day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gate, and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were as one of them. Do not gloat over your brother's day, the day of his misfortune, and do not rejoice over the sons of Judah in the day of their destruction. Yes, do not boast in the day of their distress. Do not enter the gates of my people in the day of their disaster. Yes, you, do not gloat over their calamity in the day of their disaster, and do not loot their wealth in the day of their disaster. Do not stand at the fork of the road to cut down their fugitives, and do not imprison their survivors in the day of their distress. This is describing one of the traits of Esau. So anytime that Israel has been defeated in battle or suffered a great loss, or not even necessarily a loss, but when Israel is weakened after war with a more powerful nation, that's when Esau will move in to take advantage of Jacob's weakened state. You see it in Scripture where there was this civil war between Israel and Judah, and immediately after the civil war, that's when Esau came in to plunder Jacob. And you saw it in the American Civil War when the South was defeated and in a condition of destruction and poverty. It was the carpetbaggers, the Edomite carpetbaggers that came in and did all they could to plunder whatever they could get out of Jacob at that time. So it's always it's a pattern. Anytime Jacob is defeated, or anytime Jacob it hits a low point during like the stock market crash, that's when Edom moved in to snatch up everything they could get their hands on for pennies on the dollar. And I've seen pictures of the offices of some of these Edomite organizations like the ADL or the Southern Poverty Law Center, where they actually have charts on their walls that track the downfall of Israelite society. And so that's exactly what Edom is doing. They're gloating over the chaos that they're causing for Jacob. So like if you look at, and of course I'm in America, but you could, if you're listening to this in Europe, you could apply your country then too. I mean, if you look at photos, if you look at videos of, for me, when I look at older videos of America from the early 1900s, and the people are well dressed, the people have dignity and pride, and they're obviously very prosperous, and the society is very peaceful here in America. And then you look at it over the years, over the last century, and you see this downfall of society, and now we're to the point that we have absolute filth and degeneracy running rampant. And Esau's been behind a lot of that. So they're constantly, they do spend a lot of time gloating over the way that they brought us as low as they have. For the day of Yahweh draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return to your own head, because just as you drank at my holy mountain, all the nations will drink continuously. They will drink and swallow and become as if they had never existed. But on Mount Zion there will be those who escape, and it will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. Then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, but the house of Esau will be a stubble, and they will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau, for Yahweh has spoken. Okay, so verse 15 and 16, the day of Yahweh draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. So, whatever you sow, you're going to reap. And Esau has sown a lot of misery and destruction, and that's what he's going to be reaping. Because just as you drank on my holy mountain, all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and swallow and become as if they never existed. This verse is a little difficult to understand what's being said here. I'm guessing the drink that they're drinking is judgment. But notice in the first clause of that verse, as you drank on my holy mountain. See, Esau today is occupying Israel. They're occupying Palestine, the land of Palestine. So they are on Yahweh's holy mountain. So in the same way as in the book of Daniel, when Belshazzar was drinking out of the cups from the temple in Babylon, and the finger appeared on the wall announcing that he's being judged, and it was that night that the Medes and the Persians came in and overthrew Babylon. I think it's very similar to that scenario. The Esau is in Jerusalem. They're in the same way Belshazzar was drinking out of these cups from the temple. Now they're in the Holy Land, and they're drinking and celebrating on God's mountain, which they took to themselves. And that's what brings this destruction, this judgment upon them, because Yahweh is furious that they have done this in the pride of their heart, as the book of Ezekiel says. And so the house of Jacob is going to possess their possessions. The house of Jacob is going to come in and possess this land that Esau is now holding. The house of Jacob will be a fire, the house of Joseph a flame, but the house of Esau will be stubble. The visual there is pretty clear. Stubble burns up very quickly. And so this is about the destruction of Esau. So to answer my question earlier about whether it's Yahweh or Israel that comes in and removes Esau from Palestine, this verse seems to imply that it is actually going to be Israel itself that's going to remove Esau. They will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau, for Yahweh has spoken. Then those of the Negev will possess the mountains of Esau, those of the Shephelah is the lowlands, those of the lowlands, the Philistine plain, also possess the territory of Ephraim and the territory of Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. And the exiles of this host of the sons of Israel, who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem, who are in Shephard, will possess the cities of the Negev. The deliverers will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will be Yahweh's. So again, this is about removing Esau from the promised land. If you notice verse 21, the deliverers come into Mount Zion to judge the mountain, or the nation of Esau, the government of Esau. So Esau is in Mount Zion, just like the book of Ezekiel said. So the picture is becoming more clear the more we work through this of what's going to happen. And the kingdom will be Yahweh's. So thank you for listening. I pray that this has been a blessing. And until next time, shalom.